Okay, welcome everyone. I guess we will get this meeting started. This is a meeting of the Communications Subcommittee from the Task Force Advisory Committee for the Governor's Task Force on the COVID-19 vaccine. And today we have some guests that we would like to actually have go first if we could, because their time is limited. I wanted an opportunity for Dr. Caranta and I to give you a quick update. We did have a meeting with both the commissioner and Dr. Edie, who are the chairs of the full advisory committee. And there has some discussion moving forward about how our subcommittees will be used in this effort going forward. The decision is not quite finalized at this point as how we will use the committees, because the committees course is somewhat changing. You know, our committee was to provide recommendations on how to communicate. Now the governor's office has a communications arm, which is doing a great job. We're going to hear from some of those folks today. So how can we aid them going forward? Do we need to stay as a full committee? Should we shrink down in size and be called upon inadvertently, not on a regular basis? So we're still in those conversations right now, and we should have an update for you moving forward. The commissioner and Dr. Edie are thinking about how to best utilize our team, and they will get back to us, and then we will communicate that to you as soon as we hear how this is going to work going forward. That being said, if anything changes within our subcommittee, everyone is always free to communicate directly to the full task force, to the commissioner, to Dr. Edie on anything that we see coming forward that is concerning or needs to be communicated back to the full committee. So if we can, I would love to have an opportunity for our committee to first hear from Dr. Jason Schwartz, who has been able to be kind enough to meet with us today. I wanted to give him an opportunity to update us on the J&J vaccine, which has just received its EUA clearance. Dr. Schwartz is part of the Scientific Advisory Committee, and I know that he is pulled in many directions. So I was wondering if it's agreeable with the committee, if we could have him first quickly just give us some background on the J&J vaccine that just received its clearance, because that is a hot topic for all of our, our constituents and people in the community. So if everyone's agreeable, Dr. Schwartz, could you go ahead?
Happy to. Thanks, Senator Summers. Thanks for the invitation. Good to be back here with you and Joe and your subcommittee, just to provide a bit of an update on the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which the scientific subcommittee, which I serve as one of the co-chairs, has been thinking about and looking closely at over the past few weeks or so, leading up to its EUA being issued over this past weekend. So as you've no doubt heard, this third vaccine is a really important asset in the vaccination rollout here in Connecticut and around the country. To have a third vaccine of any sorts, but to also have a third vaccine that is as highly effective as this one is, and I'll say a little bit about that more in a moment, as well as a vaccine that has these advantages that we know about, a one-dose vaccine series, a vaccine that only requires refrigeration rather than the ultra low temperature freezers of the Pfizer Moderna vaccine. It gives us a really important new tool to accelerate the vaccine rollout, as we're doing here in Connecticut in these weeks ahead, and as the country's doing. So just a bit about the vaccine to summarize how the scientific subcommittee has been thinking about it and discussing it in parallel with the regulatory review that was happening last week from the Food and Drug Administration, as well as the guidance from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Because talking about this vaccine, talking about the advantages it provides, perhaps clarifying some questions about the relative benefits it provides compared to the Pfizer and Moderna vaccine, we know is a very important challenge, a very important activity that all of us involved in this vaccination program, broadly defined, are going to be thinking about and focusing on in these coming weeks to help individuals understand how the vaccines compare, the comparative advantages each provides, and to help folks ultimately, of course, opt for vaccines, any vaccine, when it's their time, but also individuals have a choice to select for particular vaccine appointments when they sign up for vaccination. So the Johnson & Johnson vaccine was tested and reviewed and evaluated in the same ways that the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines were over this summer and fall and winter. A large, in this case, 45,000 subject randomized controlled trial that concluded, or didn't conclude, it's ongoing, but the interim analysis that provided the basis for this EUA was filed towards the end of last month. With respect to efficacy and safety of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, both stories are really encouraging. So with respect to efficacy, I think the focal point of our conversations and the way that we're thinking about the vaccine is focusing on the role that this vaccine and all three vaccines play in preventing severe outcomes associated with severe cases of COVID-19. And I'm referring to hospitalizations, ICU admissions, and as well as deaths. So with respect to the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, with respect to preventing severe outcomes, severe cases of COVID-19, 1 week after vaccines are administered, there was a 93% efficacy with respect to preventing hospitalizations. And 4 weeks after the vaccine dose was administered, there were no hospitalizations among the individuals who received the vaccine in the clinical trial. So that's a fantastic story. Same story with respect to deaths. There was not a single death due to COVID-19 in anyone who received the vaccine in the clinical trial. And there were about 7 in those individuals who received the placebo. So this gives us this focal point of saying that we do have 3 vaccines, all of which are remarkably effective at preventing severe cases of COVID-19, the cases that everything of our vaccination efforts have been prioritizing over these past several months, keeping folks out of the hospital, keeping the deaths from continuing to accrue. And all 3 vaccines give us great tools in that regard. Now, of course, at the same time, there's been attention to that broader conversation about the efficacy endpoint of the vaccine. And you may have heard 66% effectiveness against moderate COVID-19 or 72% when you focus on the US population that was tested in the clinical trial. And that endpoint does require some conversation. And it's something that we're all sort of talking about and trying to contextualize when we think about this vaccine. And that's the measure of the protectiveness of the vaccine against moderate to severe cases of COVID-19. So a moderate case of COVID-19 as defined in the trial is a positive PCR test. That is true, but it's a positive PCR test that might include 2 of a long list of symptoms. So a 100-degree fever and a sore throat would count as moderate COVID-19 with no other complications, or a headache and muscle soreness would count as a moderate case of COVID-19. Of course, we want to prevent every case of COVID-19 we can, but fundamentally our focal point in terms of turning the page on this pandemic is those severe cases, the hospitalizations and the deaths. And this vaccine gives us that tool. It's difficult to compare the broader efficacy of this vaccine to the others, as tempting as that is when we heard those 94, 95% numbers for the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, because vaccines were tested at very, very different times in the trajectory of the pandemic. Obviously, the emergence of variants has changed some of the circumstances on the ground for when this vaccine was tested compared to the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines that were tested months earlier, as well as they were tested in different populations in different countries and tested using slightly different definitions of what counted as a case of COVID-19. So as tempting as it might be to sort of put these vaccines head to head, that's not what these trials are able to tell us with any clarity. What they can tell us is what they prevent in terms of particular cases, particular outcomes. And that's where we find ourselves with this vaccine. That's the efficacy story. The safety story is remarkably positive. There really are no causes for concern in the extensive follow-up of the research subject with respect to safety. There is some of that muscle site pain, a little bit of fatigue after receiving that 1 dose, but actually not as common, not as severe as the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. We don't have reports of those rare severe allergic reactions that do occur, a couple cases per million for the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. We don't see that for Johnson & Johnson. So the safety story, something we'll continue to look at and focus on and monitor as the vaccine doses are being administered, is a really positive one. So the Science Subcommittee of the Governor's Advisory Group was looking at the same data the FDA advisors reviewed last week when they met and recommended the vaccine on Friday. We met on Saturday. We discussed the same data. We expressed our enthusiasm for the vaccine and conveyed that to Governor Lamont over the weekend. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has now recommended the vaccine as well. And there is no preference. There is no targeted recommendation that one group receive one vaccine versus another. The important focal point is that all of these vaccines are powerful, important tools. And when individuals are eligible, they should receive any of these vaccines as quickly as possible. And that's, I think, what we're trying to amplify. And I know the efforts that you have with the groups that you serve and support would be valuable to continue sharing that message as we move forward. So that's my few thoughts there, Senator. I'm happy if there are any questions or comments or anything else I can contribute. But thanks again for this invitation.
Great. Does anyone have any questions that they would like to ask Jason? If you do, just raise your hand and we will call on you. There is a comment in the chat function which says, since people of color are having increased negative outcomes than the broader population, I'm not sure if that's accurate or not. Even right to moderate cases.
I'd be happy to read it or share it. Since people of color are having increased negative outcomes than the broader population, even with respect to moderate cases, please.
PH and Maura perhaps can say a bit more about this in terms of how the state's thinking about these issues. I mean, these vaccines are being deployed throughout the vaccination program. There are, I know, there are some advantages to this vaccine that it's one dose that will help accelerate the vaccine to groups where one dose is valuable. That can advance both the speed goals and the equity goals that we're thinking about with this vaccination program. So I think it's really important to emphasize again, the ability to deploy this vaccine in ways that will help us reach all of these communities, including those more affected, as quickly as possible. But that will help both with respect to cases of varying severity, and I should say a point that I think I should note here. The question about the degree to which these vaccines prevent transmission, while it's true, we don't have the kind of clear data to quantify in a particular estimate. There is continuing evidence for this vaccine and for all three vaccines that those benefits are real and they are substantial. And we saw it, preliminarily and even in the Johnson & Johnson vaccine trial in terms of reductions in asymptomatic cases. So we're building a case that will give us increasing confidence about the degree to which we can amplify the way in which these vaccines, all of them, do reduce the transmission of COVID-19. And that will only, I think, further amplify the point of that it's time to continue accelerating the rollout. So I would think of it that way rather than thinking about selecting one vaccine over another, because again, that head-to-head comparison is just a really difficult one to make with confidence and with science to support it based on what we know and how the vaccines were tested and when they were tested.
Just as a follow-up, to be clear, I'm not as concerned about the administrative standpoint, the deployment of the vaccine. I'm asking because folks are asking us, what do we think? And we're looking to give them a good answer. And it's not from the perspective of what's easiest for the healthcare providers to deploy to the population. What should folks that are going to receive the vaccine, what would the best thing for them to hear for their benefit, not the system's benefit?
No, understood. I think the message should be to get that first vaccine the soonest you can get any of these three vaccines. That is the best course of action. I really do. I think that's the point we need to continue to emphasize. The first one that's available, as close as you can get a vaccine appointment for individuals who are eligible, that I think is really where we want to focus our enthusiasm towards where we are with these vaccines right now.
And again, if you can raise your hand when you want to ask a question, that would be really helpful so we don't end up talking over each other. One of the things that the DPH commissioner has reiterated, and Dr. Schwartz and Dr. Caranta, please feel free to speak to this, is that all of the vaccines are safe and that we're not in a position where we can go to a location and choose which vaccine we want. We really need to have people directed to the closest place where they can get the vaccine, and which the vaccine that's available, because they are all safe, should be the vaccine that people should take. And there are different organizations. I believe Hartford Healthcare has the Moderna vaccine, where Yale tends to have the Pfizer vaccine. I'm not sure if they will both be getting the J&J vaccine, but we don't want people waiting to get a particular vaccine. We want to have people get vaccinated because they are all safe. There is another question, which is from Robin. So Robin, would you like to go ahead and ask your question?
Sure. Thank you so much, Senator. My question is that, I hear what you're saying. And, we also know that, yes, it is safe in terms of all three of those, but the concern that is also out there, and I can only speak for the Black and Brown community, is the fact that because of the underlying health conditions that they have, as it relates to Johnson and Johnson, and only having that one, shot with the efficacy rate. Also, people hear that, and they're concerned about that. So you can say that, each one of them are safe and not, and which is fine. But also, as you continue to talk about how do we, be able to get this message across so that people of color will take the vaccine. And so what I'm hearing you're saying is that you're pushing it to be no matter what the vaccine is. But again, just wondering how do we communicate those things? Because that is on the mind. And see, and even what else is out there is that the reason why that's going to be pushed on them to take the Johnson & Johnson because it's cheaper. So there's all kinds of different myths and all kinds of things that are out there. So it's just not a simple thing, just take a vaccine because every one of them is safe. These are some of the things that, we really do have to be able to be prepared to answer as we deal with, and as Dr. Nunes Smith says, vaccine confidence. We're talking about confidence in the vaccine.
Great. I'll offer a thought, and then Senator, then certainly defer to you on the broader communications points. I agree completely. Promoting vaccine confidence is going to be our increasing, it already is a critical priority, but as we move forward, that will be even more important to build enthusiasm and support for those individuals who are not immediately signing up right now. We know there's a long work ahead across our communities to build that support and enthusiasm and to answer questions about the particular vaccines. That won't end when we have sufficient supply for everyone who's eligible. I'd say that with respect to safety, the broader point I think that is worth highlighting for these vaccines is both the safety data that gives such confidence from the scientific and medical communities leading up to these vaccines being authorized, and then the surveillance systems, the safety monitoring programs that are happening with every dose week in and week out, month after month, as these vaccines are being deployed at millions in doses. So the Pfizer Moderna vaccines, we now have that record of 75 million doses, that there has been a network of federal and state and medical collaborations to continue to look even for the very rare adverse events that theoretically could emerge when we give something to that many individuals. And there's that same program that will be applied to Johnson & Johnson. So we have an ongoing, this isn't a static story that we can say these vaccines are safe, but I think by pointing to the processes and trying to help explain the ways in which we continually monitor the safety of vaccines, and not just have scientists and physicians and folks who are to share that message, but to continue the broader communications efforts that I know you all partner with in your communities to help inform and reach out to ranges of individuals to help share that information, to clarify, why we're confident and why we don't rest on that confidence, but we continue to verify it. I think that's it's not going to answer the questions you raised. They're important, but I think that will be part of a comprehensive approach to allay concerns to build that confidence.
Yeah. And I think as we think about just the confidence level of people, if they're already having some issues around confidence, and, even with Johnson & Johnson, at least with Pfizer and Moderna, they have been out for a while, so there's, not that we know everything about them, but there's more information on them. Well, Johnson is something, that's brand new. But that's just kind of what caught my attention, is that just tell them everything is safe and just take it. But I think that if we're going to deal with the confidence of people taking the vaccine, these are some of the things that we really do need to be prepared to really think about, listen to, really speak with them about it, because then it becomes the government just telling them to take something, just take the vaccine, it's safe. That's not going to cut it. I'm telling you, it has to be more than that. And you can see that now. That's why we have a disproportionate amount of people of color that have not taken the vaccine.
So Robin, I just want to be clear that no one is trying to push the J&J vaccine over any other vaccine. But one of the things that the advantage of the J&J vaccine for allocation and getting it out to the community is the storage conditions are different. It doesn't need.
Yes, I know that, know all of that. Yes, no, I'm not questioning it
right.
at all. I'm just saying what is out. I'm trying to let you know. I'm not you don't have to point it to me.
No, I'm
not questioning that at all. I'm just telling you what's out there. That's all.
Okay, so and then another thing that we can do that we have been working with some of our other members on this committee, if it's helpful, is that the communities that you serve or the communities that you have close ties with, let's get in contact with each other, because we can help by setting up informational forums that you can help host and talk to the communities and have them ask whatever questions they want to the experts that are on the scientific panel. We can also get other clinicians, and they can have an opportunity to ask you there direct questions on whatever they want concerning the vaccines to help build that confidence. That's something that some of our members have been doing, and we've been doing it in multiple language, through churches, through organizations, through just community groups, and it really has been effective. So if that's something that you could help, that's one of the goals of this committee. Please just reach out. We're happy to help set it up.
Okay, well, let me just say this. I don't need that either, Senator Summers. As a matter of fact, I was on I'm going to be on a town hall meeting tonight talking about vaccine confidence, and the Ministerial Health Fellowship just had a legislative town hall meeting last week, and which is made up of faith-based organizations, in which we are also talking about vaccine confidence. And then also we have some other scheduled forums, and I also was on the forum with the Lieutenant Governor. So that's not my issue. I don't think you're quite understanding what I'm asking you and talking to you about. I'm simply talking about some of the myths and some of the things that people are concerned about, and really saying to you all that these are some of the things that we need to think about, that we need to incorporate, because that is on the minds of people. That's all I'm doing, is sharing that information.
Okay, well, we can certainly incorporate talking with you on what's the best way to communicate that confidence back to certain communities. And I know that we have Maura Fitzgerald here, and also Carter Johnson, who are in charge from the governor's office for communication. And they're here to listen. And when they can help respond, maybe we can run some things by you and folks from your community and your organization, so you see if we're answering them in a way that you think will work. So that's part of this.
Yeah, and that's basically what I'm sharing.
That for you and for others, if there are certain communities or organizations that, and thank you, Robin, for stepping up and being part of those forums, that others would like to continue those, please let us know. We're happy to help set those up. We've been doing quite a few of them, and I'm excited to hear how they go. If you want to report back when you're done, we'd love to get the feedback. That'd be great, Robin.
Thank you, Senator.
Mag Morelli, I know you had your hand up. If you would like to ask some questions.
Oh, sure. It was just a quick question. And I understand, I'm not questioning, get whatever vaccine, and that's not the message that we're sending, but we have heard there was some talk about whether or not the J&J vaccine was as effective for older people. So I just wanted to ask that question in case, for when that question comes to me.
Oh, it's a good question. This was something the scientific subcommittee did look at over the weekend, and we discussed some of those subgroup analyses that when you drill down into the particular populations who received the vaccine in the clinical trials, what can we learn about the different performance of the vaccines in different populations? And those analyses always need to be taken with a grain of salt, because these trials were not designed to give us that kind of granular information about different groups. And there's lots of uncertainty when we look there. I'd say generally that the evidence was fairly consistent in terms of the effectiveness that I described among individuals under the age of 65 and over the age of 65. There was one particular group that our subcommittee discussed in our public meeting last Saturday about individuals older than 65 with comorbidities, where there seemed to be a broader range of uncertainty in terms of what the confidence level was. This was something that we talked about, that the FDA advisors talked about at length, the CDC advisors talked about at length, and there are some statistical reasons in terms of just the very few number of cases in that population in the trial that doesn't give us concern that slightly lower efficacy in that subgroup is a real signal. So again, these are things that will continue to be monitored, but the broader pattern in terms of even by age as well suggests that there's not a reason to target one vaccine for a different group by that group. But it's something we'll continue to look more and try to get more precision about, and our federal partners will as well.
Great, thank you. That was helpful.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions? Okay, I'm having a hard time seeing everybody's hands because Bill Garish is actually running this meeting. So Maura, I think you had your hand up.
I did, but I took it down. I just wanted to say to one of the things to the point of, J&J and is it being targeted to certain communities or, that sort of thing that, those are things that DPH and the people in the vaccine program are very cognizant of. And, we want to make sure that we're, not just giving the vaccine to one certain community. So, this initial allocation that we got this week has gone to all of the various providers. So it's gone to the hospitals, the FQHCs, the pharmacy partners, and the local health departments. So it's spread out amongst the providers. And I think that on our new vaccine finder, I think it tells you, or it could tell you which vaccine they have at various clinics. So there's a little bit of a choice there, I guess, if you're looking for vaccine. But we were very cognizant about the fact of not giving all of the vaccine, for instance, to the FQHCs or to the local health departments. It's spread out across all of the providers so that all three of the vaccines are kind of equally accessible throughout the state of Connecticut and throughout various communities.
Great. Maura, while you're speaking, would you like to go ahead? You were next to give us an update.
Sure. So hello, everyone. I'm Maura Fitzgerald. I'm doing COVID communications for the Department of Public Health. Hopefully I have all of you on the distribution list that I use to send out the twice weekly briefing notes that we give to the governor to help inform his press conference that he does on Monday and Thursday. We are in the midst of doing a bunch of different things. As you hopefully saw earlier this week, and I actually put it in the chat, we just put out a one-pager on the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which hopefully will help to explain to people and give people some basic information. And our kind of overriding message on the vaccines in terms of like choice amongst the vaccines is that the best vaccine that you can get is the one that you can get. So, when you're eligible to sign up for a vaccine, the best thing you can do for yourself is get a vaccine regardless of, Pfizer, Moderna, J&J, or whatever else might be approved in the future. We are trying to be more strategic in getting messages out to our Black and brown communities and other underserved communities around the state. We are in the process right now of putting together a targeted advertising campaign that would be to radio, TV, and streaming networks, but with an emphasis on urban stations, Spanish language stations, and also religious stations. So one thing that would be helpful, if any of you know of a local religious program that might be happening, Reverend so-and-so has a program from 2 to 4 on Saturday afternoons on a local radio station. If you would know that he would be willing to have on a guest to talk about the vaccine, we'd love to try and hook up with those types of really hyper local radio stations to start getting the word out that way. So hopefully that'll start running soon. And we're also connecting with a bunch of radio stations to try and get like regular appearances on the shows for the commissioner or someone else connected with DPH or someone in the medical community. So for instance, on WICC out of Bridgeport, we are going to be doing every other Friday mornings, the DPH commissioner, Commissioner Gifford, or if she's not around, someone to stand in, just to be on for one segment to take call-ins from the population. And she did it last week and it worked out great. She was able to get out some information on some Bridgeport resident specific clinics that were happening over the weekend, and also some other ways that residents of Bridgeport could access vaccine appointments, you know, kind of outside of having to go through vans and the other normal channels. So we're hoping that we can kind of expand that around the state. At the behest of Senator Moore from Bridgeport a few weeks ago, she had asked if we had a short video that she could play in the churches in her communities. And at the time, we had a video from that we had done for the long-term care facilities for their staff to kind of encourage them to take vaccine. And we had one that was for DOC employees as well, but we didn't really have anything that was kind of specific to the more community level. So we actually went out last week to a vaccination clinic that was taking place in a church in New Haven. And we've interviewed a bunch of the vaccine recipients and some of the staff that were working at the clinic and the reverend from the church, and put together a nice little video that we sent to Senator Moore, and I believe is being sent to other legislators. But if people on this committee would like to have a copy of that video, I'd be happy to get that out to you. And let's see, we also recently put out an editorial that was authored by the governor, the commissioner, and Dr. Reggie Eady from Trinity Health. It was translated into Spanish, and I believe also Polish and Portuguese, and sent to the various Spanish, Polish, and Portuguese language papers throughout the state. So that is run in a number of outlets. So we're trying to get out there. We're trying to get to the communities that you know, that need to hear these messages. And I think, I'm not sure who's next on your agenda, Senator, but Carter Johnson, who I work with, will have a lot more details for you on a great program that they've started called the Trusted Messenger Forums. And she can fill you in on some other things that we're up to as well. And I'm happy to take any questions when.
Does anyone have any questions for Maura? Just checking. Mike Frieda, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Yes, I did.
I just called on Mike Frieda first, and then we'll go to Angela.
Thank you.
So Maura, this is Mike Frieda here in North Haven, and I'm involved not only locally, but regionally. And I wanted to ask you this question. Once the announcement of the teachers, the administrators, the bus drivers, and the 55 and over community having access to the vaccine, the local health departments had already had hundreds of people on the waiting list to receive the first dose. And those were people 65 and over and 75 and over. There's a little confusion, and maybe you can clear it up for me. Did the state inform the local health departments that all of the people currently on the waiting list were on hold and pushed back to accommodate the teachers, administrators, and bus drivers? Because we're seeing a little bit of demographic conflict right now, where 75 and over and 65 and over who have not been vaccinated feel that they've been pushed aside or on hold to integrate 55 and over, and also teachers, administrators, bus drivers, and whoever.
I think to give you a complete answer, I would probably defer to the people on the vaccine in the vaccine program, who are the ones who are communicating directly with local health. But my understanding is that local health was told to prioritize teachers' clinics but not to the detriment of the other groups. So if they had clinics set up or, waiting lists or, other things in place, it wasn't bump those to the side and focus on the teachers. So I think that they weren't trying to push those groups to the side in order to accommodate the teachers.
And one final question, because really the solution to this, we all agree, teachers, administrators, everybody should have the right to be vaccinated. And those on the waiting list who are waiting patiently, should be prioritized, 75 and over, 65 and over. So the solution has always revolved around the number of allocated vaccines per week. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think the good news is, putting aside J&J, which is about 39,000, we're over 100,000 a week. Is that where we're at right now?
Yes, we are. I think we were right around 100,000 this week, plus the J&J on top of that, which was another 30,000. I could be a little bit off on that number, and I can get you the actual numbers. Actually, probably. I'm sorry. I can probably just give it to you right now. Let's see. We were this week for first doses only. We were at 105,000 first doses, 179,000 overall first and second doses.
Okay.
And that includes. Oh no, that doesn't. That does not include the Johnson & Johnson. So 105 plus another 30 on top of that.
Thank you for answering the question. We're trying to give hope to those people still lingering on the waiting lists. Thank you.
Yeah. The good news is that the supplies do seem to be, increasing dramatically. So, and we hope that continues.
Thank you, Maura. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Okay, I believe Angela has a question now. Angela?
Thank you. Maura, I just wanted to know if there has been any movement with the federal announcement to use the insurance companies to do outreach. Do we know how that's going to play out in Connecticut yet, being that Connecticut, I know it used to be the insurance capital of the world. I don't know that we are still there, but do we have a plan? Are we working directly with our insurance companies located here?
I'm not sure. I had not heard of that. It's funny. One of the interesting things about doing communications is I actually have less time to read the news and watch the news than I did before. So I had not heard of that, but I can tell you that we have been working with Access Health CT, and we're going to be doing some work with them to get the word out through their subscriber networks, which are, pretty vast and also, involve a very good chunk of our kind of underserved communities. So we're going to be doing work with Access Health CT moving forward, and I can check with the rest of the vaccination team on what efforts there might be going on out there with the other insurance companies and get back to you on that.
Okay, great. And while you're talking with Access Health CT, if you could use that opportunity to encourage them to engage the community while we are having these vaccination clinics and testing. We have an expanded new open enrollment period. For whatever reason, there was a 3-month period. Connecticut has only chosen to extend the enrollment for 2 period and do a look and see if it's needed. I'm not sure how they're going to do the public assessment of whether it's needed after 2 months. But the federal government has led with that opportunity, and we should be taking advantage of it while we are engaging. So if you can add that to your meeting,
I will.
I'd appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you.
Tiffany, do you have a question?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to comment. I speak with James Michelle and a lot of folks frequently. So Angela, to your point, they already have an awareness. So I think that they are coming from this with a full perspective of, number one, being mindful about having people on the ground and communicating about the vaccine being a point of not only education, but assuring that people have access to sign up for the vaccine. And then to your point around open enrollment, thinking and being sure that people are equipped to ask the question if people don't have insurance, so that it is a full conversation with community. So I appreciate James Michel for his equity lens and his thoughtfulness around using this as an opportunity to educate, inform, get access, and to also think about the open enrollment period.
And actually, Angela, it just occurred to me, and I apologize for not mentioning this before. I don't know much about whatever federal thing is going on right now with the insurance companies, but I can tell you that we have had conversations with the insurance industry and with our partners at Anthem and Cigna and Connecticut and the other healthcare companies in Connecticut about, partnering up on pushing out messages on the vaccine and things like that. And they've been very engaged and very willing to help out with messaging. So we are doing work with them outside of whatever the federal government has going on.
Great, thank you.
Maura, would you be able to send the video that you had prepared to all the committee members?
Yes.
That would be great.
I'll send it to tonight when I send out the briefing note. I'll put the link to the video in there.
That would be perfect.
Cool.
Okay, if no one else has their hand up, which I don't believe anyone does, the next person that we'd love to have speak is Carter Johnson. Hi, Carter.
Good afternoon, everybody. Hi, thank you, Senator, for having me. So I was brought on by DPH to help with some of the community outreach around the vaccine. And what we've developed is a program that we're calling the Trusted Messenger Forums. One way of looking at this is sort of train the trainer. And so the idea is to pull together leaders from community-based organizations across the state and provide them with a forum for receiving information and education around the vaccines. We have a physician on each one of these forums, thanks to Dr. Karanta and our work together, building a speakers bureau of clinicians who speak multiple languages. And so we pair a physician with a community leader addressing other community leaders, providing education around the vaccines, talking a little bit about messaging, how they can talk about the vaccine and address issues of hesitancy in their messaging. And then it's really a conversation with these community leaders at the end of the forum to not only share best practices, but hear what's going on in their communities, learn from them, what they need, what some of their challenges might be, and then to elevate those back up to DPH. We've had 3 of these events so far. We have 3 next week. Robin was kind enough to participate in one that we had pulled together with the help of the Connecticut Health Foundation and others, and Dave Reyes, pulling together some faith leaders where we had a forum. We also have been working through the ESF 15 structure and their diverse community task force. They were our pilot. And then in terms of what we have coming up next, we've got one with the Vera Institute and ULA, that's Unidad Latina Acción. That's really to be talking about the specific population of the immigrant population. So we have that one next week. We have one with the deaf and hard of hearing community next week. And then we've got the senior centers next week as well. And so we try to group community organizations that serve particular populations. And so we want to address their very specific concerns, and we want to give them access to physicians who understand those communities. And so it's not just a one and done thing. What we do is we have the forum and then we have follow-up, right? And we want to make sure that we continue the dialogue, that we continue to hear what these community-based organizations need, what they're hearing. It's such a fluid situation, things change every day. And so we want to make sure that we're sharing, the most up-to-date information. Part of that is pulling together a toolkit, which is housed on the DPH website, posters, fact sheets, videos, etc. And all of those are being translated into multiple languages. So we encourage you to use those materials as you see fit. One last note, I wanted to let you all know that there's also a huge effort underway on the equity side. And we hear that loud and clear from our conversations and today. I know Deputy Commissioner Heather Aaron is sort of leading that charge and is collecting proposals from all across the state to really try to get down to the street level of outreach. I know, for example, in the Fairhaven section of New Haven, the health clinic there, along with Vera Institute and ULA, are planning a door knocking event in that neighborhood where they plan to go door to door, hand out information, whenever possible, try and schedule people for vaccines during those conversations, arrange for transportation if they need it, to the local health, to the community health center for their vaccines. So, lots of this kind of work is going on across the state. I know the United Way is looking at programs that would be statewide. And so there's really a focus right now on trying to figure out how to get to those really hard to reach communities with a door-to-door canvassing type approach. And then finally, I just wanted to share with you all that a wish of mine is to create a system on the website, on the DPH website, where people can submit community events, sort of like, the Hartford Current has CT Now calendar. You can go in and create your own event. And this way, people across the state, residents, can look at the website and say, is there a forum in my neighborhood? I want to learn more. Where do I go? And so this is in the works. This would be part of the new landing page for DPH. And I'm really hopeful that will get kicked off, because I think it will be a great resource for folks. So I've talked more than I should, but wanted to open it up for questions.
Great, thank you, Carter. I think we have a couple questions in the chat. First, Hillary Felton Reed said that she's working with the Association of Health Plans, and they are doing some stuff, but they would like to continue the conversation on insurance, helping bring out the messaging. Also, Robin said, how do we get the outreach proposal information from you? And Angela has said that flyers of recent events and one tonight at 7 p.m. have been placed in the chat. So
that's great. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Anybody have any questions that they would like to ask? If you do, just raise your hand. Just give me a few minutes. There is a little bit of a delay. No? Okay. Carter, one of the questions that we wanted to pose to you were, we have all these members that are on this committee that have deep ties to the communities. And obviously Robin has already stepped up and met with you and had forums in her community. Would you like these members to reach out to you so that they could also partake in what Robin's doing, where they meet with their leaders, they get trained with a clinician, and then they can start the process?
We would love that. Welcome it. Yes, please. I will put my contact information in the chat so that you can reach out to me directly, but we would love to do that. Yes.
That's one of the ways that we had talked to the commissioner about how to utilize the folks that are on this committee, reaching out, getting trained to be a trusted messenger with a clinician, and then dispensing out into your community. And you can feedback as to, how to appropriately message to the community that you are trying to reach. And that would be terrific, Carter. If you could, then everyone could reach out directly to you.
Absolutely. I'll put my email and phone number in the chat. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions that they'd like to ask? Again, just give me a second because there's a delay. No. Okay, I'm going to move on now to Dr. Karanta. I wanted Dr. Karanta to talk a little bit, if he could, about what he's seeing out in the community. He has a lot of great information because he's right on, in the front lines there as far as the vaccine goes, and ideas he has on how we can communicate our message a little bit better. And then he is going to take over chairing this committee because I have to run to a public hearing. So I want to thank you all for joining us today, and we will continue to send out the latest information that we have. We'll share the video, and we will wrap back up with you hopefully next week when we hear more from the commissioner on how this committee will move forward. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Karanta. Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate the chance to make a few comments. And I just want to circle back to some of the questions that were raised earlier about discussing the relative benefits of the Johnson & Johnson and the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. And I think if you ask me as a clinician how to phrase that, the response to that question to people, I would start with this conversation. First off, the ultimate goal of vaccines is to prevent severe complications from COVID. If all COVID caused was mild cold and flu symptoms, we wouldn't have the need to be here. And what is clear about the evidence from the vaccine trials is that anybody who receives any vaccine has an almost zero chance of having a severe case of COVID, which really is the endpoint that we want to strive for. So I want everyone to be comfortable in recommending to your friends, colleagues, people in your community, that if you're recommending any vaccine, you're really going to accomplish the task that the entire vaccination process was meant to accomplish, which is prevent deaths and severe cases of COVID. And both the Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, and Moderna vaccines all do that. I also want to raise a point. It was discussed earlier about how vaccines are being distributed. Most of the large vaccine providers are distributing vaccines in an equal and a fair way. And I will say that in terms of reaching some of the more difficult populations of patients, homebound patients, as an example, I am not seeing that any of the large organizations are favoring one vaccine or the other, and that they're using all the different vaccines. So for example, we're using Pfizer and Moderna, although they have a little more complex transportation process, to try to bring vaccines to some hard to reach people, mostly with transportation issues. So feel confident that the vaccine is being spread equally and distributed equally across the population. And the final issue I would raise about the vaccine is that, there is some personal choice involved here. And sometimes that's a positive thing for people, that we're offering them a couple different options and they can choose the option that they like better. And some folks may like the concept of a single one vaccine, and it may suit what they would like to do. Some folks may want to stick with Pfizer and Moderna because it's been around a little bit longer, and that's really okay. And I think that's okay for there to be differences of opinion about that. And I've seen people choosing one over the other kind of for their own personal choice, as long as they understand that all the vaccines are safe and effective and prevent severe COVID. I think that's the message to get across. And then having some variety of choice, I think is helpful. So those are the only comments I want to make. I just appreciate all the work that everyone else in the group has done, and the obvious large amount of work that's been done behind the scenes here. So on that note, I'll ask, are there any other issues or questions or comments anybody wants to bring up? Angela, is your hand up or is that from before? I can't tell.
No, I just raised it. I just had a question regarding the homebound.
Mhm.
Are we using the VNA or similar agencies to actually go out into the community and vaccinate those that are homebound? I know heretofore, the cooling, the required cooling of the vaccine was an issue, but are we going to be intentional about doing that on the ground? Outreach to
I
those
know
folks
of, and if Maura's still on the phone, she can comment. I can speak. Certainly in many areas, the large vaccine providers are beginning to build up vaccine distribution efforts for homebound providers, whether they're specifically using visiting nurse associations to do that. I'm not sure, but I know they're using whatever resources they have available. I know that the FQHCs are also working to develop in their own communities the capability to actually reach people directly who are homebound. So those activities are ongoing, they're happening, and they're expanding. And I think as time goes on and they get some experience with how to manage the vaccine supply chain through those processes, there'll be more efforts to do that. And I'd have to defer to more about whether the VNAs are specifically working in that area. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, Dr. Caranta, I don't know the answer to that either, specifically on the VNAs. I know that local health and a lot of the bigger providers are getting out to the homebound communities or homebound individuals and getting them vaccinations. And I think things are being done, a little bit differently in different parts of the state, but those efforts are underway. And I think we're, especially now that we have the J&J vaccine, I think we're looking at beefing up some more mobile vaccination units that could help in that effort and help with congregate settings and getting to, kind of denser senior populations with people that don't have easy access to transportation. So those things are actively being worked on and being done out in the communities now.
Thank you. Any other questions? Any other comments or suggestions from the committee? Well, it's the top of the hour. We're just at 5 o'clock, and I want to thank everyone for their time and their efforts, and we will prepare to call the meeting to a close. Thank you, everyone.